and welcome back. Well, as we've got loads of time on our hands with this lockdown, I thought I would give you all a quick tour of the WTF/GW0FZY Radio Shack. We don't find too much modern equipment in there, but lots of interesting vintage stuff for those guys that are interested, and there's also bits of other bits and bobs. It's always interesting to go around looking at other people's radio equipment, so I thought we'd have a quick look inside, give you a quick tour. This workshop, radio shack, call it what you like, actually started off as a stables which was behind our garage. It was built by the previous owners, or the previous owner to the previous owners, and it was started out as life as a stables for, I don't know, 3 or 4 small horses, but the building was built in such a state that it it was all falling apart, and the roof was terrible as well. They had it wasn't a tiled roof they had on there, and it was leaking, and it was just being used just for storing just junk, really. So about 3 years ago, I had the whole thing knocked down and basically rebuilt on the same footprint. So this is what it looks like from the outside at the moment, and it's turned into a really good little workshop radio shack. It's got it's all insulated and waterproofed, solid construction, so it's worked out really well. Just to give you an idea of what the aerials we got up here. So that's the tower. It's a 60-foot tower going up to that's a Yagi up there, a Cushcraft X7, which is out of tune. It's about 25 years old, so it's not the best antenna in the world. It's supposed to be a tri-bander, but it only works on 20. Also up there as well, there is actually a dipole for 80 meters, which I use quite often for the AM stuff. And then moving round on this mast over here, just to put things into perspective, there's the field. We've got a 12 meter tenor mast up there, which currently has the remains of a rhombic antenna on it. This is actually working as a 200 meter off-center fed doublet, and it works reasonably okay. It's not brilliant. The rhombic I made actually went all the way over to a tree in the neighbour's garden who owns a farm, and that didn't work brilliantly well. It was a bit of a disappointment. So I took one leg of it down, and what we're left is this part of it here. And it goes, as I said, all the way across the property to the other, right over to the other field, over there in the distance. And it tunes up okay. I mean, it will work on, it works up to about, I would say about 18 megahertz. After that, I think the SWR tends to be a bit difficult. And it's fed with open wire ladder line, homemade ladder line. And it goes into the shack just there, and there's a balance tuner there which sorts that out. Anyway, let's go inside and we'll take a look. So inside the shack, I've got 2 main areas. This is my sort of work area, and then we've got sort of an area down there which is mostly for sort of operating all the radio equipment. So up here we've got most of the test equipment. I've got an oscilloscope and spectrum analyzer, a couple of SIG Jennies, power supplies, and then we've got a few trays with bits and pieces. As you can see, I've got the 813 transmitter there, which I'm making a few tweaks to since the last video, just trying to improve it a bit. Actually making up a solid state oscillator for it, just to try and isolate it, stop it from chirping. So that's what we've got there. got my trays full of components, resistors, mostly over there. And this is just a general shelf full of junk, miscellaneous things. Fans at the top, inductors, various shapes and sizes. I've got my vintage telly there, which you saw in a previous video. On this desk here we've got, that's actually the 12 set, a C12 set, which works quite well. And I use that every now and again. It's in good nick actually. It's quite a nice thing, runs off a dynamotor. We'll have to do a video on that I think at some stage. That's the T1509, which we had a look at in a previous video. Then on this desk here I've got some nice bit of vintage equipment. I've got a Drake TR7, which I quite enjoy using. That was one of the first ever rigs that I saw being used when I first took my LRAE back in '83, I think it was. And I've always wanted to get one of those. It works okay actually for a nice sort of vintage solid state rig. Good old Drake TR7. I actually like the American stuff. You'll notice in the shack they don't have that much in the way of Japanese rigs. Don't really like those. I think they're a bit soulless, so I prefer the American stuff. That's the wireless set 52, which actually I use that with the T1509. So that's got a nice bit of vintage equipment that I restored. And moving down here we've got the GU81 amplifier, which I use every now and again. I've got another shelf of shame, wireless set 19. That one actually works, and I've got a 52 set there which doesn't actually do anything. That needs sorting out, and that's my transformer shelf full of just transformers and everything else. There's a rag there, not quite sure what that's doing there. This is my main AM setup. So I've got an AR88, and my go-to AM transmitter is a homebrew Class E transmitter. This works absolutely brilliantly. I built this a couple of years ago. I must actually do a video on this. This is a I'll turn the modulator on. You can see these lovely digital dials. This is well, one of my few pieces of modern equipment. So this Class E transmitter will do about 300 watt carrier, although I don't use it on 300 watts. I generally use it on the lower setting. So it gives about 100 watt carrier, beautiful AM, and I've got some audio equipment there to try and improve things. I use that on 3615, the local VMARS frequency here in the UK. I've got a AR88 which I use for receiving AM, which is works really well. And there's a lovely old DX60 which I sometimes use. I picked it up at a rally, didn't pay too much for that, and there's a Heathkit VFO to go with it. Don't use that often actually, but I should do, I suppose. And up the top there we've got an oscilloscope for monitoring the AM, a homebrew ATU, high power ATU that is, a couple of vacuum capacitors in there. That's my aerial changeover system, so I've got antennas on one side and transmitters on the other, and just by moving a couple of switches down there, oops, sorry about that, I keep the camera still, I'm able to change antennas and transmitters quite easily. There's a load of vacuum relays in there, which helps to keep things isolated. And moving over to this side of the shack, that's the linear, the 3500Z with the power supply there. Right at the back here we got some more gear. Just move the chair out of the way. So again, some more vintage equipment here. This is down the bottom here. Just get it into focus. That's a Syncal what were they? What's the best way of describing it? Sort of mobile communication setup. So it's two Sync L30s in the chassis and an associated RF amplifier on the left there. And apparently this was ex Special Forces Signals Regiment, the Red Hand Gang, which apparently was some, as I said, SF Royal Signals unit, which I think was active sort of in the First Gulf War, the Balkan War, etc. And this was kind of like a sort of mobile command HF communication setup, which was used back then. It works reasonably well. The Syncal units have been a bit temperamental. They're sort of digitally controlled or voltage controlled or oscillators inside there, and it's obviously quite old technology compared to modern stuff. So it does tend to be a little bit flaky from time to time, but it does all work, believe it or not. And then up the top there, we've got a 19 set. And then there's then above that is another homebrew transmitter. That's for 10 megahertz, a couple of 6146s and a VFO. We use that occasionally. That's the balance tuner for the big doublet outside, and then next to that is the 4-square control box. The 4-square is round. You can't see it from this side, from the shack. It's around the other side, which we looked at in a couple of videos a year or so ago. And this is my sort of go-to rig, I suppose, which I use virtually all the time on CW. This is my modern K3S, and I use this pretty much. You know, if I want to just go on the radio, I'll just switch this on, and it's really a good go-to rig. And as I said, I prefer the American stuff. I've had Japanese Yaesus and ICOMs and things like that, but I just don't find them. I think they're good rigs. Don't get me wrong, but they're a bit soulless. I just prefer these. These Elecraft rigs are really good, especially if you're into CW. I mean, you can't beat the Elecraft stuff if you're a CW op. So on this side, just lotions and potions, for want of a better word. And I keep some of my transmitting valves up there. The bigger valves are sort of on the top shelf. We've got some 813s in those iMac boxes, and there's some EL34s and a few other bits and bobs up there. And that is pretty well it. We've got just a few bits and bobs down there. Oh yes, I'm going to show you. That's the homebrew rig that we featured in a video not that long ago. Fire extinguisher, all important, just in case. There is actually down there, I've got a Vanguard, which actually works. I haven't used that for a while. KW Vanguard, and we've got a Ediston receiver there again. Those both work actually, but they're sort of I haven't got a space for them at the moment. Like most Radio Shacks, always short of space. Up on this wall here, I've got my 833A audio amp that I built. That was built about a year ago, and that actually works really well. It's if I want to play music from the computer, I use that, so it's quite loud, but I don't use it at too high a volume, otherwise it might have upset the neighbours. Not that we've got any around here, but anyway. So folks, that's a quick tour of the GW0FZY shack. Lots of junk, and if anybody's got any good American vintage equipment, anything like a Collins they want to find a good home for, just let me know. That's it for now. See you again next time.